Firearms have become also an increasingly popular self-defense tool in the arsenal of a real estate agent. Around 15 to 20%, so less than pepper spray by a fairly significant margin on most polls that I see out there. But it's becoming more and more popular as more and more people get into shooting sports and they get exposure to it. And there are a lot more courses and things out there being offered, even to real estate agents specifically for classes and things of that nature. So it's something that I see on the rise, and especially with all the other incidents that you have out there from active shooter and everything else. The use of firearms and the carrying of firearms as a self-defense option has been on the increase. The thing about firearms that makes it a little bit different than pepper spray is that pepper spray is overwhelming, like a 5-to-1 female male. I mean, women tend to prefer to carry pepper spray far more than men. And with men, it's reversed. With firearms, it's reversed. It's about a 2-to-1. More men, twice as many men as women carry firearms as their primary method of self-defense. So it does a little bit of an inverted flip when it comes to the demographics and who uses it and how they use it. So that becomes a little bit of an issue and a little bit of a change. So not everybody is comfortable with firearms. Most people have a bit of a comfort level when it comes to pepper spray because they feel it's not lethal. I'm not actually taking anybody's life. I'm just making them uncomfortable. I'm spraying them down and they'll be hurt, but then I don't have to, I can sleep at night and all those types of things. So firearms comes with, has lethal force. I mean, there's just no other way to look at it. It's a lethal force option. You are using deadly force when you use a firearm. There's no way to back down from that. And that's just not something that a lot of people are comfortable with. More men tend to be comfortable with that than women. But again, I see those numbers on the increase. So some of the comments and some of the things I see about firearms, when you look at the forums, when you look at the videos, and when you talk to actual agents, it's usually, most people don't say a whole lot, but there's usually a few people out there that usually like to buck up and go, only way to stay safe is by carrying a firearm. That's the only way that you can keep a 200-pound man off of a 100-pound woman and all this all this other nonsense. It's always these bravado macho types that step up and speak up and say, carry a gun. Well, it's not the right option for everybody, period. It is not something that you should recommend for anyone, just anyone. Firearms is a serious business. It takes a lot. And we're going to go into each one of those pros, cons, what things you must do and things you should never do right now. So one of the things that you see when it comes to firearms is concealed carry. That's an obvious choice. So when it comes to a con, concealed carry permits are not available in all areas. I don't know where you're watching this video, but our friends to the north, about 5 miles north of here, is the state of Maryland. When it comes to firearm laws, I lovingly refer to the state of Maryland as the People's Republic of Maryland, because it is damn near impossible to get a permit for concealed carry in the state of Maryland. It's awful. You just can't. It's really, really hard to do. There are other places where it's just not a possibility. It's not an option. So whether or not you have the ability to carry significantly impacts whether or not you can or whether or not you should. Now, if anyone out there, anybody that you know would say carry anyway, have their head examined and then ignore that person and all the future advice that they give you, because these are felonies, folks. Felonies. You get a felony weapon charge. That is a life-altering event for you. That changes everything. Your ability to vote. You do not want to go down that path. Is it worth it? I know the old discussion of, again, the macho guy steps up and says, I'd rather be carried by 6 or judged by 12 and carried by 6. Meaning you'd rather be judged by a jury than carried by pallbearers in a casket. I get it. Believe me, I get it. Nobody wants to come home anymore to my beautiful family, my lovely little girls, than I do. Nobody. But I can tell you what I won't do is I won't do prison time just because I thought that something may or may not happen. I will find other ways to defend myself and keep myself safe. Because again, we focus in on that boom. Everything that happens to the left of the boom ends in happy life. Everything that happens to the right of the boom ends up in awful life or no life at all. So focus in on those things that are left of boom. And you cannot carry always. Huge, huge, number one, big con. So the second con, the second bad thing about carrying a firearm is that not only is it not legal to carry in all situations. It's not legal to use in all situations. State laws, local laws vary tremendously on your ability to use it, because using a firearm is more than just putting rounds down the tube and shooting something or someone. Brandishing it, putting your hand on it, having it out and displaying it, threatening to use it when you have it. All of these things, they carry with them legal problems or legal challenges. Because remember, I keep saying this over and over and over again, but self-defense is a legal issue. It's not a tactical issue. It's not about whether or not you can put rounds in a target. It's about whether or not your actions are legal or not. Now, this is not to deter you from being able to defend yourself successfully, because you have that right. You have that right according to the laws, and you have that right, in my view, by our Creator. So you can determine those things, but everything that you do has a legal implication. Brandishing, pulling it out, threatening to using it, pointing it at somebody, warning shots. Man, that is a big deal. If you're going to go down that route of a warning shot, you better think about exactly how you are going to do it and have that clearly defined. Because by the time the cops get there and you have to be able to explain your story to them, having no real story and kind of just whimming it or on a whim and making it up as you go along for about how you determine how you were going to use your firearm, bad. That is not going to end well, and it's not going to end quickly. It's going to take a long time, because the law enforcement's going to need to do their investigation. There's probably going to be a trial. Either way, whether you used it or whether you didn't, there's going to be a trial in some way, shape, or form. So please, please, please understand that just because it may be legal to carry, how you use it and what you do with it afterwards carries a huge legal implication. Next up, we talked about the pepper spray, where it can cost as much as $150 a year in order to maintain the appropriate level of supply. And that's a one-size item. That's just rebuying different canisters of pepper spray. But when it comes to firearms, even though they're much less expensive than they used to be, they are still incredibly expensive, because now you're looking at $300 to $700 just for a simple pistol. And ammunition, depending on who you're talking to and how those charges come about, you're going to be anywhere between 50 cents to $1 per round. Now, I know it can get less than that depending on what you're shooting. So for some things, I mean, you just want to shoot the basically Russian ammo and this real cheap stuff that you can get off the internet, just to get use and not proficient as far as hitting round, but getting used to using it and getting used to using the firearm. That ammo can be a little bit cheaper, but you also need to practice, excuse me, with the actual rounds that you plan on putting in your weapon. The first time, because everything shoots a little bit differently. There are different powder charges and grains that you can put in, different points and different things that do different things. And by the way, not every type of tip, when it comes to the actual tip part of the bullet, not all of those are legal in all situations in all states. There are those things that are quote unquote cop killers, and they're not legal in every different locality. So just because you can buy it doesn't mean that you can use it legally. Remember, legal issue, self-defense is a legal issue, not a tactical one. So when it comes to all of that stuff, it leads to very high costs for maintenance of that. How much should you shoot per year? Well, I mean, that kind of depends on you and how much you carry. If you carry all the time, every day, you need to be shooting a lot. Every month, every week, as much as you can. I would certainly recommend thousands of rounds a year. 1,000 to 2,000 rounds a year, if you're going to carry every day, is probably sufficient. But less than that, and you're going to start to tail off. These things, they're perishable skills. Yes, you can still pick up and have some basic understanding of it, but your brain slows down when it has to try and remember. I think of it as like your old computer system. It has to find that file that you stored away a long time ago of how to use this firearm effectively. So your brain stops doing some other things that might be really important in that situation to help you remember how to use a firearm. Just slows everything down a little bit. This is why you practice all of those things repeatedly, so that becomes second nature, so you can then use all of your senses on trying to figure out other things that are going on in your environment. So it's very key to understand that it can be very expensive to not only purchase initially, but to maintain and to practice. Very expensive. If you use that math of 1,000 rounds a year, and it's 50 cents to $1 a bullet, now we're talking $500 a year, versus the pepper spray, which was $150 on the high end. So you're looking at low end You're absolutely right, DJ. Got a great comment coming. It's very difficult hitting the target under duress. And ironically enough, my man, you led me right into the very next bullet point. One of the big cons is the ability to hit that target. Spot on, DJ. Because what happens, and there's lots of reports about this, about law enforcement officers who train with thousands of rounds a year. I mean, I've seen some officers, depending on their department, depending on what they have to do in their world, they might fire as many as 1,000 rounds a month. 1,000 rounds a month in order to maintain their firearms proficiency. And here's what happens. That's 12,000 rounds in a year. So when something bad happens, when they get into a duress situation where they have to actually use their firearms in defense of their own life, stop an assailant, whatever, in a high stress environment, law enforcement studies have shown over the years hit about half of the targets they aim at. There are You can't do an internet search, do a Google search, and go out there and find stories of law enforcement using their firearms. And you wonder, how did they shoot so many rounds and not hit anything? Because it's extraordinarily stressful. It is very, very difficult to do. It is very difficult to maintain poise and composure for something. Pistols are really, really hard to do like that. You have all kinds of different things going on. I don't want to get too much into a physics or geometry test here, but the shorter something is, the more difficult it is to aim. The longer something is, if I had a crayon sitting here and I was trying to point a crayon across the room in a straight line, that's a lot harder to do with any consistency over a long distance than if I had a broomstick. A broomstick I can see really easily. I can look down a broomstick and tell very easily how accurate I can be across the end of the room. The shorter the pistol, the more difficult that is. The shorter the barrel, the more difficult that is. That gets into some of the other things that we'll talk about in a second. But, it's really, really hard to hit that target effectively. And it takes an enormous amount of practice in order to be able to do that. So if law enforcement officers who are practicing between 5,000 and 12,000 rounds a year only hit half of their targets under duress in training situations and scenarios that they go over and over and over and over on a regular daily, weekly, monthly basis, how effective are you going to be at hitting the target? I mean, maybe you are, maybe you aren't, maybe you got that ability, but that's something that you have to come to terms with in your own life. Whether or not you're going to carry a firearm, you have to come to terms with the possibility that just because you have it, you've got it, and this is your thing. You've trained for this, you prepared for this, and you pull it out and you shoot. Nothing happens. You missed. Now, when you get into some of those very popular items out there, I love 1911 firearms. I think they're just an awesome platform, but you get 7 rounds. You get 7 45 caliber rounds in a typical 1911 pistol. If I'm speaking in a foreign language right now, this is a very popular platform. 45 caliber pistol has been around for 100 years, over 100 years, but it's very, very popular because it's very reliable and it works really, really well. But you've got 7 rounds. And if you miss half of your targets, maybe it's the first half. Maybe it's, you got 7 rounds and it's 1, 2, 3, miss. 1, 2, 3, 4, miss. And those last ones are the only ones that you have left. Keep between you and a bad guy. That is, that's right. Army standard for years, 1911. Personally, this is me. You have to determine these things on your own. I like to be able to carry a lot more ammo than that. I like my Glock 19. It's my preferred carry. That means I get a 16 round capacity. 16 plus 1. But nonetheless, I get 16 chances. So I can shoot 8 times and miss if I'm still using those numbers and statistics and still have 8 left. I'm just more comfortable with that personally. But you have to come to terms with that because this is a big limiting factor when it comes to choosing firearms. The next piece is more of an emotional thing. And one of the huge cons and one of the huge deals, the biggest challenges about using a firearm is that when you have to use it, it is a life-altering event. Once you've gotten to the point where you have to use your firearm in defense of yourself and others and use deadly force on another human being, bad guy or not, another human being, it is a life-altering event. Your life is forever changed. Forever changed. It's bad enough. It's bad enough that you're in a situation, you're in that boom, you're in that left and right of boom, and you're there. It's bad enough that you're there. But then, in the method of self-defense, because we talk about how this can go, you survive or you don't, as you move down that line, once you make that choice and you use deadly force and you kill another human being, your life is changed forever. Even if you go down that recovery route. It's a significant thing, folks. I can't tell you enough. There's so many studies out there and so many things about cops who quit, about military members with PTSD, about all these different folks out there that have had lots and lots of issues with having to use their firearms and actually killing another human being, bad guy or not. It is such a big deal. And if you haven't thought through that entire scenario, what it's going to be like, and this is where there's a little red book for safety, for realtor safety out there. And they use terms out there. It's like, we're trying to keep things lighthearted and fun. I'm telling you, using a firearm is not lighthearted or fun when it comes to defending your life and taking the life of another human being. If you think that's lighthearted and fun, then go to their class. Go listen to their nonsense and listen to their crap, because they've never had to be face to face with a bad guy. And then you tell me who you would have, who would you hire to protect you and your family? The one who's fun and lighthearted, or the one who knows the whole deal, the whole situation, from soup to nuts, from beginning to end, the entire ramifications of what happens when, if, as you move down that line from left the boom, through the boom, and on. You want light and fuzzy? Go take their class. You want the truth? Stay here. I'll give you the truth. It is real. It is ugly. It is nasty. It is nasty. There are sights and smells and things that go along with that that you will never be able to erase, never be able to take out of your mind. So, once you decide that your self-defense is going to be reliant upon a firearm, you have to think through all of these things. And if you get to the end of that thought process and you determine, I'm okay with that, then good. Get yourself a firearm, go out, get the appropriate one. We'll talk about that in a second. And practice. And still continue to think through new scenarios. You present yourself out in the real world and you see a scenario and you go, you know what? If that took a turn, it didn't. But if that took a turn and this started to happen, how would I have reacted differently? Or how would I react if that happened and that didn't happen? Think through those scenarios. It is a never-ending process of thinking when you will choose to use it. So that leads you up into the pros. One of the best things, I don't want to go total gloom and doom about firearms, because I am a concealed weapon permit carrier. I do carry. I mean, I talked about my Glock a little while ago, but that's not my only firearm by a long shot. And I do carry. Not always, but I'm not telling you when I do and when I don't. I'm not telling the bad guy when I do or I don't. That's the whole point of carrying concealed. But when I can, legally and otherwise, I take certain precautions and measures about what it is that I can't do. When I can't carry, because of legal issues or otherwise, I take a different approach. So I want to stay left of boom at all times. And I know that if my options on the right-hand side of boom are limited because of legal problems, well, then I need to focus all of my attention down here and really do everything I can to avoid this situation altogether. Remember that acronym I used a little while back, that you get paid to live, because you want to prevent, avoid, impede, and deter. And that helps keep you on the left-hand side of boom and keeps you safe. So I don't want to try and mislead you to think that I think firearms are a bad thing. I just don't think they're the right thing for everybody. And I think it's actually a small minority of people who should carry firearms, personal opinion. But you might got to make that call. You got to live with it. You got to live with the whole ramifications. So what are some of the good things about guns? Because there are many. And I'm a big gun fan. I like to shoot. I like firearms. But I don't have this. Let's just say I try to keep a very healthy relationship and a respect for what it is that they are. I'm not enamored by it, like, ooh, get all excited and, like kid on school. I mean, they're fun to shoot, but you got to remember what they're for when it comes to your self-defense weapons. I have hunting rifles and other things that are just fun to shoot, little 22s and things like that. That's fun. When it comes to picking a weapon for your personal safety, that's the good news. It's extremely effective, because you don't have to kill in order to be effective. Even though it is use of deadly force, you don't have to kill to be effective. Sometimes, like we talked about before, brandishing, pointing, threatening, saying, hey, I've got a gun and I will use it. Saying things like that. All of those things can be very, very effective in a lot of different situations. So a firearm is a great equalizer. I mean, you talk about that 400-pound man and a 100-pound woman, it's an equalizer. It evens the odds right then and there. Granted, you have time, distance, and shielding. You have the time to get it out. You have the distance to be able to use it effectively. And you have some type of shield and something that you can protect yourself behind. So those are key elements when it comes to it. but it's really, really, really effective when used properly. And you can use it properly. Hopefully you're hitting 50% of your targets or more under stress. And it really can even the odds. The other option is like pepper spray. There are a variety of options that you can use out there. There's different sizes and calibers and holsters, and there's all kinds of things for women these days about purses and different types of clothing options. I mean, I'm absolutely amazed. There are some things, you've seen in the movies with the little garter holsters, and I mean, there's some really, really amazing stuff out there for anybody, but especially women these days, to be able to carry a firearm on their side. There are some limitations with those, and we'll get into those in a second, but the options are just about limitless. Whatever you can imagine, whatever you can think of, you can do it. I mean, boot holsters and inside the waistband, outside the waistband, shoulder harnesses, inside a pocket of a jacket or inside a portfolio, your nice legal pad that you carry around. There's a gun inside of that. Inside your purse, either inside the flap or on the outside, in your backpack. I mean, all kinds of different things. They even make those that look like cell phones these days. Got to have a very small firearm to go inside of there, but they even make them to look like that or make them look like a fanny pack or anything else. Lots and lots and lots of options. And they aren't incredibly expensive considering what it is that they do. So I talked about before how it can be expensive to get and maintain, but on the grand scheme of things, it's a whole lot cheaper than hiring a bodyguard to follow you around all day. So it can be very inexpensive and very attractive in that nature. And you can get a very good, very reliable firearm for $400 or $500. A very good pistol for $400 or $500. A very reliable pistol for $400 or $500. And once you have it, I mean, they typically, you get a good one, but they typically don't have a lot of maintenance that goes with them. I mean, keep them clean and things like that, but you don't have to change the oil or break parts. I mean, once you buy it, it's pretty much good for a long time, hopefully your entire life. So it's reliable. Firearms have, particularly when it comes to certain things like Glocks and mechanisms like that, it's pull the trigger. There is no safety on a Glock. So if you ever hear anybody say that, you need to switch the safety off on your Glock, then they don't know how they work. But there's no safety. Just pull it out, point, squeeze the trigger. It's rolling. It's ready to rock and roll. There are others that have various types of safety mechanisms, but for the most part, they're really, really, really reliable for what it is that they do. When you squeeze the trigger, pretty damn good chance that it's going to go boom and send something down range. That's just the way it works. So they have enormous, enormous options and possibilities for every type of situation. You want small caliber, large caliber, small hand, big hand. Ability to shoot, not so good at shooting. Meaning that you can shoot basically shotgun style pistols out there that shoot multiple pellets and things like that spray out in a pattern as opposed to a point. So lots and lots and lots of different options. They're fairly inexpensive and it's extremely effective. So firearms are awesome, in that respect. But there are some things that you absolutely must do when it comes to getting firearms. And the first of those is the same as pepper spray, but this one carries some significant legal weight because you start automatically talking about felonies. And that's verify and comply with all legal requirements. All of them. Every single one of them. If you decide that it's okay for you to break certain firearms laws, if you use that, if it goes all the way down to the point where you've gotten the boom and bad things are happening and your life is in danger and you make this call and your choice is, as a lot of those internet tough guys like to talk, and some of them in face, like, I'd rather be judged by 12. If you've gotten all the way down to the point in your event in this life where the boom has happened and your choices are jail or death, there's so many other things you should have been doing down there. If you've gotten all the way down to this point, then you've got a lot of answering to do to law enforcement, to the legal system. You're going to get in a lot of trouble, legally speaking. If you've been known, and people, because investigators will do this, they will go back out and they will talk to folks and they will interview, get character witnesses and things like that. And if you typically have been that guy walking around saying that, oh, just shoot him in the face, just shoot him in the face, just, get out your gun, shoot him, shoot him, shoot him. If you're that guy, things may not go well for you. Maybe there's not a criminal proceeding. Maybe there's a civil suit afterwards. Maybe there's a wrongful death. I mean, you got to understand, there are legal requirements and legal implications for pretty much everything that you do when it comes to a firearm. Everything. From possessing it, when you can, when you can't. Where can't you take it? Can you take it into a public building? No, you can't. Can you take it on the grounds of a school? No, you can't. Can you carry it onto private property if they have a notification or a sign on the outside that says we do not allow firearms in this premise? No, you can't. You can't carry it in there. If you get inside, there's no sign on the outside, and you walk into a place and they say, hey, we don't allow weapons in here. Maybe they saw it, maybe just, whatever. They say, we don't allow weapons in here. Are you then allowed legally to say, well, I don't care what you say, I'm carrying it? No, you are not. That is illegal because you have to have permission of the landowner. So there's all these different things that you have to pay attention to. You have to be aware of, and you have to know all of them. And laws change, so you have to keep up with it. So it's not just something you can go, well, the laws in 1985 were this, and in 2017, they're the same, right? No, because making a mistake on this thing it could end up with you in jail. Now, let's just take that scenario again, and we're looking at the boom when the bad thing happens. And let's just say that you use guns as a left of boom measure, meaning that nothing's really kicked off just yet. You just want everybody to know that you're carrying a gun, and then you'll use it if you have to. Yeah, that could be against the law. You could still be over here. You could be left of boom, and you could be breaking the law because you're a dumb person with the use of the responsible use and the legal use of your firearm. That's you got to get your head straight on this one. You got to know what it is that you can and can't do when it comes to legally speaking. Now, same as pepper spray, but more important when it comes to firearms. The next point on this is to understand exactly when you will use it. Specific use, specific things, absolutely specific things. You were at fear for your life and you didn't know what was going to happen. You actually need to work through some of these scripts in your mind because you need to be able to have a very clear story and a very clear explanation of what it is that you did and why you did it to law enforcement. Any use of that firearm is going to require filling out paperwork and being interviewed, interrogated, whatever you want to call it, depends on the circumstance. But you're going to have to be able to explain to law enforcement why you used your firearm, whether you killed somebody or not. You're going to have to be able to explain exactly what it is that you did and why. Just going to have to do it. So get used to some of the language and look for those things that are the legal safeguards, things that you should say and shouldn't say. But you need to understand exactly the situation that you would use it and not use it. And you got to stay within those parameters. Because if you're just willy-nilly just going all over the place, going, well, whatever the situation calls for, yeah, you're setting yourself up for failure because this is a no retreat type of action. Once you have brandished, drawn, and fired your weapon, you have changed your life forever, regardless of what happens with the boom. Because you could be a dummy and you could use your weapon down here on the left of boom side. Now you broke the law. Nobody else did. You did. So just understanding what you will do and what the circumstances are that you will use a firearm is absolutely critical. And next point, just like pepper spray, you got to understand what you're going to do after you fire your weapon. What are you going to do? You're going to put one more in his head just to make sure? You're going to put two more in the chest just to make sure? I mean, you got to really understand what it is that you're doing. Did you stop the threat or did you take it a bit too far? What are you going to do next? Are you going to reholster your weapon? Are you going to throw your weapon over a bridge? That stupid crap they do on TV. So what are you going to do next? Are you going to go outside? Are you going to wait for the cops to show up? Or are you going to go outside, wait for the cops to show up and put your firearm on the hood of your vehicle and step away from it? So a little bit so that when the law enforcement arrives, because they've arrived to a call for shots fired or something of that nature, your firearm is sitting right there. You got your hands up. You say, officers, my firearm is right there. It's the only one I've got. It's the one I used just now. What are you going to do next? How are you going to do that? Or are you going to just walk outside with it in your, you're going to wait for the police officer. I'm scared. Well, if you're walking outside still holding your firearm and the police start to show up, they might think you're the bad guy. Be careful about what it is that you're going to do. This is not complicated stuff. Just think through a couple things of what you're going to do and how you're going to react once you use your firearm. What are you going to do next? Because next is really, really, really important. And also, same thing, next item up for bid is the same thing for pepper spray. Where are you going to keep it? Where are you going to store it? And can you get to it? So, you've decided that you're going to keep it in your glove compartment in your car. But you're not in your car. You decide to keep it in your briefcase and your briefcase is in your car and you are not. You decided to keep it in your purse. Your purse is in your car. You are not. You can see where this is going, right? You decide to keep it in a locked safe. Can you open it quick enough? You decide to keep it in an unlocked safe. Can you keep it away from hands of people that would want to steal it or use it, or children who might not understand all the things about it? I've got 3 little girls and they've all seen my guns, but I take extreme safety measures to make sure that they don't have access to them and don't have the ability to use them. So, and I will not, by the way, I will not share with you what those particular things are, for my own personal safety. I'll give you some examples in later videos, but not today. And not exactly the exact things that I use because, well, I just don't tell my secrets to the planet. So there's that. Then what are you going to do and how are you going to keep it there? Is it going to rust if you keep it there? Is it an environment that's healthy for the gun? Is it the mechanism's going to still work? A lot of the holsters, they have all these things. Well, if you keep this holster, your firearm won't fall out. Well, it won't fall out because you can't get into it. And if you can't get into it, then you can't use it. If you can't use it, then what good is it? So understand where you're going to store it and how you're going to use it all those times. And lastly, same with pepper spray. Practice, practice, practice. You've got to practice. This is not I bought a gun, I have a gun, I'm safe now. Or I bought a gun, I have a gun, I took a 3-hour safety class, I shot about 150, 200 rounds, and I'm good now. That's not how this works. It's not how that works at all. You must continue practicing. You practice every day driving. You don't think of it as practice because it's just places you need to go. But the more you drive, hopefully the better you are getting a driver, but there are some people who just aren't very good drivers. Likewise, there are people who aren't very good with firearms. If you are one of those, maybe firearms are not for you. I can tell you specific circumstances, and I'm picturing individuals' faces in my head that we go to the range, and every time they go to the range, I give them an enormous amount of attention because they do things that are unsafe, unwise, and very fundamentally incorrect. I need to give them a lot of guidance in order to get them through the range successfully and not hurt themselves or others. I can think of specific individuals. I mean, the number of faces is starting to click through my head. Not everybody should be carrying a firearm because it's not for everybody. If you were that person, it's not for you. If you're scared, the very idea of carrying a firearm is scary, don't carry a firearm. If round fired while cleaning. Yeah, absolutely. Great comment. You've seen that a lot. That's one of the most common things that when kids get hurt and when the gun owners themselves is a round goes off when they've cleaning it. Again, I'm having specific scenarios. Remember running an arms room out at Fort Lewis, Washington when the cadets were coming through and they had blanks at the time because they were doing field exercises and things. And I can't tell you how many times that they came in. I mean, I can't tell you how many times these are cadets, future officers in the United States Army. When they came through and they handed their weapon to us, there was a round in it. I can't tell you how many times that happened. I mean, a lot. So and these are highly trained, highly intelligent college graduates, future leaders of the United States Army. And they couldn't tell whether or not there was a round in there, even though there was a big giant sign outside that told them clearing procedures and a safety barrel right there. The procedures, the exact procedures were continually barked out by those of us inside the arms room. Handle should pull to the rear, check your chamber, do all these different things. They still didn't do it. So don't just have the confidence that you know what you're doing. You have to know what it is that you're doing. So practice, 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 and understand all of the different legal ramifications that come with practicing. You can't just go out in your backyard in suburbia and start firing off rounds. Got to go to a range, but you probably knew that. Most people do. So pay attention to what it is that you're doing, where you're going to practice. I don't like to go to those particular ranges where everybody's an expert. I like to go where everybody is comfortable and everybody lends a hand, and you just try to avoid. I don't like Rambo. I don't like the Rambo types at the range. I don't like the quiet guys that don't say anything either. I like a friendly place where everybody's there to learn from each other, and it's not freaky or unusual to sit down and ask somebody going, hey, I like what you're doing here. Or I like your weapon. You mind if I watch you for a minute? And you're not trying to be creepy, but you're trying to learn from them. It's like, hey, you're really good. You got any tips? That's the type of range that I like to go to, but that's just me. So find a range that you can practice in, and sometimes that means a membership cost, sometimes it doesn't. Depends on where you are. In a more rural area, you might be able to find somebody that has a place that you can just go shoot some targets. But if you're going to practice, make sure that you're practicing correctly, because it's not practice makes perfect. It's perfect practice makes perfect execution. If you're just burning powder, as we like to say, then that's fun, but it's not effective. It's not training. It's not the same thing. So be sure that you're practicing appropriately. So the next and last little chunk that I'm going to talk about is things that you absolutely must not do under any circumstance when it comes to firearms. And the first one is so important. And don't buy based on looks, based on size, based on caliber, or based on what the gun guy behind the counter told you, or God help you, the person standing next to you at the counter. Because believe it or not, there are people that go to the gun stores. They just like to hang out there, and that's fine. But generally, they have pretty bad advice when it comes to firearms, because they read every magazine, they watch every video, they read every blog. That's not what you want. What you need is the firearm that fits you personally. A lot of gun guys out there, a lot of people at the gun shops, and a lot of those nuts standing next to you will say things like, "Oh, you're a girl. You should get a small one. You should look at a pocket pistol or a small." You know how hard those things are to shoot? I can't stand 32 caliber pistols and smaller, because they're really, really, really hard to shoot. Remember that thing before we talked about a crayon and a long pole? That thing is so incredibly hard to shoot. It is very hard to shoot and be accurate with it. Most of them come with extremely long and extremely difficult trigger mechanisms. They have a lot of travel. All right, DJ, we'll see you later, buddy. But a lot of them have a lot of trigger travel. So you got to move the trigger a very long distance in order for it to fire. And sometimes it can be up to 7 to 9 pounds of pressure that's required to pull that trigger. If you're not, 3 is where you should be. 3 to 4, maybe 5, 7 to 9. It's that way because it's designed to be safe to move in and out of your pocket. So if you don't have it in a holster, you can put it in your pocket and pull it out of your pocket. And it takes an extreme amount of pressure, an extreme amount of travel to actually fire the weapon. So that is not always the best option, because it is really, really difficult to do. I'd have to give you a physical demonstration to be able to show that. But the shorter the pistol, the harder the trigger pull, and the longer the travel, it is very difficult to do. And that pretty much describes every pocket pistol that they try to sell to women in particular. So be very careful on that. Get the one that fits your hand. It just feels good. When you pick it up, you go, you know what? This feels pretty good. It fits my hand. I like the way the grip goes. I can get to the trigger pretty well. I like where the trigger is. I can get to a safety if there is one on that particular weapon. I can get to it easily. I can operate it with both hands if I really need to. So where is it and how does it work for you? Is it comfortable? And then determine about, okay, what type of caliber do I want? So first is fit, and then caliber. So you've got to fit. It feels good in my hand. It's not too heavy. It's not too light. So what are my caliber options out there? And what does that mean? Does that mean, I can only have 7 rounds in the magazine because I'm choosing a 45, which shoots a hot dog sized round, or you can get smaller rounds that are kind of pinky sized, 9mm or less. Some of the 32 calibers and 35s do, they will be in a larger framed weapon, but not always. So how many rounds can you carry, and how many are you going to carry, and what do you feel is important to you? Determine those things in order. Later on in other videos and some other videos I've already had, I talk about actual caliber choices and some things that you want to do. But it's important not to choose your weapon and your firearm based on looks, size, price, or what the gun guys say, because that's not what's appropriate for you. And the next up is to treat the firearm. The next thing absolutely not to do is to treat the firearm as you're good to go. I got a firearm, good to go. Same as pepper spray, same as a fire extinguisher. Just having it doesn't make you any safer. So please don't just think that because you bought a firearm, because you went to the range for a few hours, and now you keep that in your purse or under your seat in your car, that you're safer. What you do, the actions that you take that keep you left of boom, paid to live, prevent, avoid, impede, or deter, those things that you do to the left of boom are the things that are going to keep you safe, not possessing a firearm, not having one. And it may not even be legal in your area. So keep that in mind. And the next up is to always store it where you can get to it. We talked about that at length in some of the other sections, so I'll move on pretty quickly from that one. And then the last piece is you absolutely cannot ignore laws and legal use. I went into this at length already. but it is so important to understand the legal responsibilities that you have when it comes to owning, possessing, using a firearm. You got to understand that. There's no two ways about it. You absolutely have to understand it, and you have to be good with it. So when it comes to where to buy and what you're going to choose, there are a lot of different things to take into consideration. Just because it fits in your hand well, just because it does all these different things, once you take it out and you practice with it, you just can't hit crap with it, then maybe that's not the gun for you. I have a funny little thing where I'm left eye dominant, but I'm right-handed. So not every firearm works for me because the sights don't work very well, or the trigger mechanism doesn't work very well. I can shoot fairly well ambidextrously in both hands, but I like to be able to shoot predominantly with my right hand. So that comes into it. Test it, practice with it. Have some other people come out to the range with you and watch you do what you do. Is it effective? Practice things drawing quickly. You don't do this at first with any rounds in your weapon. You can do this at home. With no one around, don't point it at anybody, all those kind of things. Do it with nothing, no ammunition whatsoever in the chamber, and practice pulling it out and using it from wherever it is that you are retrieving that weapon. So both pepper spray and firearms carry huge responsibilities with them. They can be effective, extremely effective, but you have to understand what it is that they are. And they are all after the boom, right of boom mechanisms. Self-defense is all right of boom. All of it is right of boom. The bad thing has already happened or started to happen. So I implore you to not just think that because you got pepper spray, because you got a firearm, that all of a sudden you're safe now. And that just because you went to a weapons range or you practice with that pepper spray, that you're safe now. Because that's not it. Possession does not mean you're safe. So I hope this has been helpful to you. This is episode 10, session 10 out of 12. Got 2 more. And the next 2 are going to be pretty awesome for real estate agents. So I look forward to getting those out. We're going to have some tomorrow. We're just going to be live on YouTube. We're going to have some open house tips and some property showing tips. I mean, we're going to get into the tactical nuts and bolts right now. Things you should do and things you shouldn't do. Real simple, real easy. Change the way you do things right in an instant. I'm not going to give you like the associations do. I'm not going to give you 56 things to do. I'm going to give you a couple core things. Easy, simple procedures. Do this, don't do that. If you like that app, if this, then that, or eat this, not that, it's going to be along that format. Do this, don't do that. If you must do this, do that. It's going to be real simple. It'll be easy to follow. And hopefully that one will be a little bit more entertaining and not quite as dramatic and intense as it is when it comes to talking about self-defense with lethal applications and deadly force. So thank you again for watching Real Estate Safety Workshop number 10, The Truth About Pepper Spray and Firearms. And if you would, please, if you've watched this far, please share this video out. Thumbs and likes are always appreciated. Share this. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit that little subscribe button down there because more is coming after this. Thank you for watching. We will see you next time.